Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kuandyk Bishimbayev. Kuandyk Bishimbayev was born on April 11, 1980, in Gildorda, which was part of the Kazak SSR. In 2000, Kuandyk began his career as a bank manager. He completed a short internship at the Ministry of Economy, then spent several years in senior roles at major companies before returning to the ministry. In 2016, he became the Minister of Economy, making him one of the youngest high-ranking officials in Kazakhstan. However, just 8 months later, he was dismissed due to a major scandal and was imprisoned for accepting large bribes. He received a 10-year sentence but was released on parole after 1 year. He later apologized to Nursultan Nazarbayev, the then president, who granted him a pardon. Kuandyk's personal life includes 2 official marriages before he met the future victim. His first marriage was to Aigerim Rova in 1999, while he was still a student. They had a son, Alisander Valikhan, in 2000, but their marriage ended in 2004. In 2006, while working as an advisor to the Minister of Economy and Budget Planning in Kazakhstan, he married Nazim Karmanbabagalaova. They were married for 14 years and had 3 children together. However, in 2020, Nazim initiated their divorce. Sultanat Nursultan was born on May 15, 1992, in Pavlodar, a city in northern Kazakhstan. As a schoolgirl, Sultanat developed a strong interest in astrology. She thoroughly studied related literature and created horoscopes and natal charts for her friends and classmates. To her surprise, many of her predictions turned out to be quite accurate. Eventually, she decided to turn her hobby into a profession, and success followed quickly. Sultanat promoted her astrological services on social media, offering personal and online consultations. She provided both short-term and long-term forecasts, assisted people in achieving their goals, choosing careers, and finding spiritual growth. Additionally, she offered advice on love, assessed compatibility, and helped individuals navigate their relationships. Sultanat only worked with women and girls. She quickly became financially independent by earning good money from her passion, something she knew well and enjoyed. Her social media following grew significantly, and many people sought her services, leading to consultations being booked months ahead. She was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. In the spring of 2022, Kuandyk Bishimbayev, who was a dedicated fan, came across Sultanat's page on a popular social media platform. He was captivated by the young beauty and decided to reach out to her by signing up for an astrological consultation. However, she turned him down, explaining that she only offered services to women. This rejection only increased Kuandyk's interest in her. He persistently sought her attention by showering her with compliments and trying to win her over, insisting that she was the only one who could help him and that he exclusively trusted her expertise. Although Sultanat appreciated his flattery, she was determined to avoid meeting him, finding his behavior distasteful. He repeatedly offered her an online consultation, but she was firm in his refusal. For months, Kuandyk persistently tried to ask Sultanat out on a date. During this time, he learned almost everything about her: where she lived, who she interacted with, where she went, and what her interests were. Despite this, Sultanat continued to reject his advances but told her friends that she had an ardent admirer. Eventually, Sultanat agreed to meet him. Kuandyk made every effort to impress her. He was polite and courteous. However, that first meeting was only the beginning. In a candid discussion with her brother, Sultanat expressed that the man was not her type and that a relationship between them was unlikely. Initially, neither Sultanat nor her family was worried about the Kuandyk's behavior. She believed she could keep him at a distance, and her family and friends trusted that she could make her own choices. However, a month later, the situation began to shift. He found a way to get closer to Sultanat by reaching out to the eldest member of her family. He expressed a desire to speak with her grandmother and seek her blessing. This gesture affected Sultanat, but she still declined to pursue a relationship with him. Unexpectedly, in the fall of 2022, Sultanat visited her parents in Pavlodar and shared that she didn't expect any significant changes in her personal life. She confessed to her brother that she was troubled by the 12-year age gap with Kuandyk and felt no romantic attraction towards him. Additionally, her astrological calculations indicated they weren't compatible. However, less than a month after that visit, her brother stumbled upon a post on social media where Sultanat announced that Kuandyk had officially proposed to her and she had happily accepted. This news shocked the entire family, as it was completely unexpected. Even her friends were taken aback, as she had recently told them that Kuandyk was not the right match for her and she believed nothing serious would come of it. In December 2022, just a few months after they met, they held an extravagant wedding, featuring an expensive banquet at one of the most popular venues in Astana. It's important to note that their marriage was not officially registered. They only participated in a special marriage ceremony at a mosque and did not register their union with the authorities, so they were considered civil partners. During this time, Sultanat's feelings towards her partner changed significantly. She frequently shared with her friends how intelligent, educated, well-read, and articulate he was, and how he could easily engage in conversations on any topic. She also firmly denied any wrongdoing on his part in a high-profile corruption case that led to his brief imprisonment, insisting that he had been framed and was serving time for someone else's crime. On the surface, the couple seemed happy. Kuandyk showered his wife with gifts, and she affectionately referred to him as her golden husband, expressing that she had no regrets about marrying him. Their friends admired them and actually celebrated her marriage. However, this happiness was short-lived. The first warning sign appeared after their wedding when the couple moved into the home of the husband's parents. The parents lived on the first floor, while the newlyweds stayed on the second floor. Almira, the mother, tried to shower Sultanat with love and support, often giving her gifts and helping her from household chores. However, she was unable to protect Sultanat from her husband's behavior. Sultanat occasionally visited her parents with her husband, but she chose not to invite them to her home because it upset Kuandyk and led to arguments. Initially, her family was unaware of this, but less than a month after her wedding, her brother, Aigerim, visited her on New Year's Eve and witnessed an uncomfortable situation. A large festive table was set up, but the celebration was meant to be a small family gathering. When her brother and his wife arrived with gifts for everyone, Sultanat felt embarrassed because she had no gift to offer in return. To resolve the awkwardness, she decided to give the woman a bottle of expensive perfume that her husband had bought for her the day before, which she hadn't opened yet. However, her actions not only upset her husband, they made him extremely angry. He yelled that she had no right to give away what he had given her and started insulting her. The guests, sensing the escalating tension, quickly decided to leave the house. The parents, attempting to defend their daughter-in-law, were abruptly silenced. To make matters worse, in his fury, Kuandyk overturned the table filled with food and drinks, ruining the New Year's Eve celebration. Aigerim was taken aback by what he witnessed and was unsure how to respond. The following day, during a phone call, Sultanat revealed that her husband's behavior had drastically changed since their wedding. She didn't understand why and was hopeful that the situation would improve over time. Aigerim advised her to come home and end the relationship, but Sultanat firmly rejected his advice. 2 months after the incident, Sultanat unexpectedly sent her brother some selfies. In these pictures, her face was covered with severe bruises, and she asked him not to ask her any questions. Concerned, her brother attempted to reach her by phone, but she didn't answer. He then called her husband, who agreed to meet for a discussion. During their meeting, Kuandyk, Sultanat's husband, told him to stay out of their affairs and refused to explain the bruises. He also couldn't tell him where she was, which left her brother feeling very uneasy. Fortunately, Sultanat was discovered in her parents' country apartment, where she had a set of keys. Despite her loved one's pleas, she decided to return to her husband, claiming that she loved him and was willing to do anything to save their marriage. For a while, her husband treated her well, showering her with gifts and promising to change for her. They even took a trip together to a popular resort in the Maldives, appearing very happy. However, later, the vacation photos revealing visible bruises on Sultanat's body and fingerprints on her wrists, suggesting she had been roughly grabbed. Aibek stated that neither he nor his parents had heard his sister mention any issues in her marriage since then, although her behavior and appearance changes were telling. She had lost a significant amount of weight and became more reserved. She started wearing outfits to cover up the bruises and cuts on her body. Additionally, she stopped taking appointments and ceased offering online consultations. On social media, she only posted photos with her husband, expressing her luck and love for him. As it later turned out, her husband prohibited her from pursuing her passion, leaving her without any income and fully dependent on him. He monitored all her actions and interactions. She needed his permission to meet friends or have lunch in a cafe without him. He even checked her phone calls and messages. Sultanat was only seen in public with Kuandyk, who acted like a devoted and caring husband. Most of her friends were unaware of the distress she faced at home and even envied what seemed to be a perfect family. Once, Sultanat recently shared with a close friend that her husband controlled every aspect of her life. He forbade her from working, prohibited her from communicating with her parents without his permission, and was unreasonably jealous, often accusing her of infidelity. He also physically abused her. When her friend heard this, she was shocked and urged the woman, Sultanat, to leave her husband right away. However, Sultanat reacted by yelling and insisted that she wasn't seeking advice, she simply wanted to talk about her situation. Sultanat, seeking to save their marriage, sought help from a family psychologist. However, her husband dismissed all the options suggested by his wife and insisted on using his own specialist. During their sessions, this psychologist convinced Sultanat that she was solely responsible for their problems. In a recent conversation with her brother, Sultanat expressed her concerns that her husband had hired the psychologist specifically to belittle and demoralize her once again. In the summer of 2023, Sultanat tried to leave her husband and planned to stay at her parents' house for a while. However, just a week later, Kuandyk came to take her back, asking her to give their marriage another chance. He suggested they move into his house, and Sultanat thought that a new environment might help their relationship. She also believed that having a child together would improve her husband's treatment of her, but she was unable to get pregnant. At the last family dinner in October, Sultanat attempted to leave her controlling husband and quickly sought a rented apartment with her brother's help. However, just 10 days later, she not only returned to him but also underwent the marriage ceremony again at the mosque, a fact she shared with her family. On November 5th, she invited her parents, brother, and a few close friends to a restaurant owned by Kuandyk's brother, Bakitsan Bazanov, to celebrate their reunion. During the ceremony, her husband acted very gallantly and courteously, showing his affection for her and vowing to protect her, while always keeping an affectionate eye on her. That evening, everyone was convinced of his genuine feelings and words, but tragedy was just days away. On November 9th of the same year, Sultanat's brother returned home from work and was going about his day when he received a phone call. A relative, sounding frightened, asked him if the rumors circulating on social media were true. Confused, he asked her to explain what was going on. She then sent him a link to a news article stating that the former Minister of Economy had killed his young wife. Aibek was disheartened by the news but found it hard to believe what he read. Just the day before, he had spoken to his younger sister, who had once again mentioned that she planned to leave her husband. She had asked him if she could stay over at his place, and he told her she was welcome anytime, even pointing out where the spare keys were. However, neither that evening nor the following day did she come home, and her phone had been silent since then. The man hurried to his sister's house, but found it empty. Her husband was also not picking up his phone, and the situation was becoming urgent. They quickly decided to head to the family restaurant, where Sultanat had last reached out to them, to seek answers. While Aybek was on the way, he received a call from his parents, who had seen the news and wanted to understand what was going on. However, he couldn't provide them with any information and only assured them he would find out more. Many police officers were present in the restaurant. When they learned that Sultanat's relative had arrived, they immediately offered their condolences, explaining that Sultanat had died before the medics could assist her. Aybek was in disbelief. He thought it must be a terrible mistake, but the news was unfortunately true. Witnesses indicated that by the time Aybek arrived, Kuandyk had already been arrested and taken to the station as the main suspect. Kuandyk firmly denied any wrongdoing, describing the incident as a tragic accident and insisting that he had been trying to help his wife. Additionally, his brother and who was the restaurant owner, Bakitsan Bazanov, were also taken into custody on suspicion of involvement. In the beginning, the suspect's lawyer claimed that his client was completely innocent and pointed out the lack of evidence against him. However, it was later revealed that the ex-minister and his brother had destroyed crucial evidence by deleting video recordings from cameras inside and outside the restaurant. Fortunately, experts were able to recover the footage, which shocked everyone who saw it. The investigation into this complex case lasted nearly 4 months, during which Kuandyk continued to assert his innocence. He acted as though he believed he could escape punishment, even as he faced serious charges of murder with extreme cruelty. Forensic experts who examined the deceased noted that they had never seen such extensive and severe injuries before. Some of these injuries occurred 6 to 8 hours before her death, suggesting she was beaten for a long time, leaving no uninjured areas on her face and body. Kuandyk's lawyers attempted to downplay his responsibility. He himself claimed that most of his wife's injuries were self-inflicted due to her being drunk, stating that she frequently fell and hit her head on the bathroom tiles and furniture. According to Kuandyk testimony, on the evening of November 8, 2023, the couple attended a concert by singer Dima Bilan with friends. During the concert, they had a heated argument, but the friends couldn't clearly explain what it was about. The loud music made it hard for them to notice that Kuandyk and Sultanat was fighting. They initially thought the couple were just having a discussion. Suddenly, the couple left the concert hall without saying a word. They then went to the Bao restaurant, where they continued their argument privately in a VIP cabin. The camera footage reveals that Kuandyk took several bottles of alcohol from the bar and went to a booth with his wife. While they shared a bottle of wine and talked about their relationship, she expressed her dissatisfaction and announced her intention to leave him. This infuriated Kuandyk. He screamed at her, threatened and slapped her. Following this, she called her brother and informed him that she would be staying at his house for the night because she had decided to leave her husband. Around midnight, as she was leaving for her brother's house, her husband confronted her and continued the argument. The surveillance footage reveals that the couple argued for about 15 minutes. Eventually, the man persuaded his spouse to re-enter the building for a short time. Inside, they continued to fight in the vestibule before isolating themselves in a stall, where there were no cameras, leaving us to speculate about what happened there. Footage from the hallway camera captures Sultanat attempting to escape from her husband. She acted calmly and maintained her distance while he repeatedly tried to close the gap, grabbing her hands, shaking his head, and pushing her against the wall. Sultanat, unable to escape, tried to hide from her abusive husband by locking herself in the bathroom. However, he began to kick the door violently, causing damage as he attempted to break in. When he finally got in, he struck her multiple times in the face. He then said that she was dependent on him, claiming that he had met all her needs. The husband alleged that in a fit of anger, Sultanat stripped off her clothes and jewelry, flushing them down the toilet to show that she did not want anything from him. Alternatively, some accounts suggest that he forced her to undress to humiliate her. After the gold jewelry fell down the drain, Kuandyk became enraged and struck his wife multiple times in the face. He then pushed her forcefully, causing her to fall and hit the toilet. During the trial, he argued that his wife was drunk and had fallen several times while undressing, hitting her head on the tiles and plumbing. He claimed that they had planned to go home after leaving the restaurant, but he felt unable to drive because he had consumed too much alcohol. He also didn't want to call a cab because he was embarrassed by his wife's drunken state, as she was wearing a coat over her underwear. They returned to the booth in the same stall. Shortly after, the couple exited, but Sultanat paused to look at her injured face in the mirror. Her husband then aggressively pushed her towards the exit, leading to a violent confrontation. He brutally attacked her with his hands and feet and pulled her by her hair. Around 7 o'clock in the morning, he dragged her back to the VIP cabin. There, he ultimately caused her death, although during the trial, he claimed he hadn't harmed her, arguing that she had fallen and injured herself on the floor and furniture. He said that Sultanat lay on the sofa and fainted. He noticed a bruise on her face and felt worried, but instead of calling an ambulance, he contacted a fortune teller to see if everything was okay with his wife. The fortune teller assured him that she was just drunk and needed rest, which made Kuandyk feel more at ease and decide not to interfere. He mentioned hearing snoring, which he later realized was actually a death rattle. Around noon, he realized his wife was no longer breathing and urgently called his brother, Bakitson, for help. They decided to close the restaurant and asked the staff to leave. After that, they erased footage from all the CCTV cameras. During the trial, Bakitson stated he trusted his younger brother's claim that Sultanat was just drunk and asleep and agreed to delete the recordings, which he believed showed her behaving inappropriately and bringing shame to herself and her family. Bakitson only called an ambulance later in the evening, by which time her body was already cold and rigor mortis had set in. He claimed he attempted to resuscitate her, but it was too late. Sultanat had already passed away. The investigation also focused on Nazim, Kuandyk's wife and mother of his 3 children. A few years prior, when the ex-minister was arrested for corruption, she defended him publicly. However, shortly after his release, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and stating that she had outgrown their marriage. However, after her ex-husband was publicly accused of brutally murdering his new wife, Nazim gave an honest interview. She acknowledged that he was indeed capable of such a crime. Nazim shared that they had been married for 14 years, but after the birth of their second child in 2011, her husband became aggressive, selfish, and narcissistic. He began to think the world should revolve around him, with his opinions as the most important. Furthermore, he constantly cheated on her, without any effort to hide it. Kuandyk was arrested in 2017, and it was only then that Nazim discovered the full extent of his infidelity by accessing his personal data on his phone. She learned that he had multiple mistresses, who frequently changed. After he was released by the Pardon Commission, he became increasingly violent and aggressive. A month later, a minor disagreement escalated between the couple, and in a fit of rage, he smashed the toilet lid and threw it at Nazim. Nazim successfully avoided confrontation, but in that moment, she understood that her marriage had come to an end. She believed that Kuandyk had suppressed his darker tendencies for a long time, knowing she would not accept such behavior. However, he did not hold back when it came to humiliating and insulting his mistresses, who were unable to resist him. Regarding Sultanat, Nazim thinks that Kuandyk deliberately selected his target and tested her patience and willingness to endure. Once he realized she would stay quiet and wouldn't leave, he revealed his true nature as a refined sadist. The trial started in March 2024, and it quickly became apparent that it would be challenging. The family of Sultanat demanded that the trial be as transparent as possible, allowing journalists to attend and the public to observe the proceedings. They were concerned that Kuandyk might leverage his wealth and extensive connections to pressure witnesses and judges in an effort to evade a severe punishment. He requested a jury trial, which was approved. A total of 12 jurors were chosen, 10 main jurors and 2 alternates, along with the presiding judge. Kuandyk had previously been convicted of a serious crime but was out on parole. A new serious offense could have led to a life sentence. In a jury trial, he would only face the death penalty if every juror, along with the judge, unanimously agreed. The chances of this happening were very low, so he held on to that hope. During the trial, he repeatedly claimed he was not guilty of premeditated murder with particular cruelty, arguing that the incident was accidental and resulted from a tragic mix of circumstances. He stated that his spouse provoked him by insulting him, yelling, and becoming physically aggressive. However, numerous recovered video recordings from surveillance cameras presented evidence that contradicted the initial claims. The authorities initially attempted to charge him with domestic violence, a crime in Kazakhstan that, due to lenient laws, does not carry severe penalties. This decision sparked significant criticism, particularly from the family of Sultanat. Her mother, in court, expressed her heartbreak over being unable to say goodbye to her daughter due to the severity of the injuries, while fearing that her son-in-law might face only a minor punishment, which shattered her faith in justice. In response to the public outrage, a new law was enacted in April 2024 to impose stricter penalties for domestic violence in Kazakhstan. Kuandyk pressured his brother, who was accused of being an accomplice, to provide false testimony to help him avoid consequences for his actions. However, Bakitsin requested the court to protect him from Kuandyk, and this request was granted. Throughout the hearings, Kuandyk made numerous attempts to disparage his late wife, labeling her as inadequate, unbalanced, and an alcoholic who frequently cheated on him and provoked his anger. He tried to persuade the court that he acted out of passion that night and only struck his wife a couple of times, claiming those injuries were not fatal. He argued that all her other injuries were self-inflicted due to her frequent intoxication. He claimed that the bruises on her neck were caused by attempts to revive her, insisting that he was trying to help. But his brother, Bakitsin, stated that Kuandyk prevented him from calling for medical assistance for Sultanat and was more interested in deleting footage from the cameras. Kuandyk then instructed him to take her cell phone back to their home to make it look like she was moving around the city, tricking her brother, Aybek, into believing she had returned to the apartment, even though he was monitoring her location. During the 9th hearing, he and his lawyer asked for the judge to step down, claiming they was biased. Their request was denied, and the judge continued overseeing the trial until a verdict was reached. On May 13, 2024, he was found guilty of serious charges, including inflicting bodily harm, torture, and murder of his common-law wife. He received a 20-year sentence for murder and an additional 7 years for battery and torture. In total, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. His brother, Bakitsin Bayzanov, was also convicted, received a 4-year prison sentence for providing shelter. The court considered his lack of prior legal issues, his genuine remorse, and his full cooperation with the investigation. However, the family of the victim, Sultanat, expressed their dissatisfaction with the ruling. Her father had hoped for a life sentence for his former son-in-law, claiming that any lesser sentence would be unjust. Meanwhile, Sultanat's brother pointed out that a 24-year prison term for the 44-year-old defendant effectively amounted to a life sentence. The tragic story of Kuandyk Bishimbayev and Sultanat Nukhnova serves as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic abuse and the complexities of relationships marred by control and violence. Despite Sultanat's initial dreams of independence and success, her life took a harrowing turn, ultimately leading to a heartbreaking end that shocked her loved ones and exposed the darker aspects of her husband's character. This narrative underscores the critical need for awareness, support systems, and interventions to protect individuals from the perilous cycle of abuse, highlighting the importance of listening to and believing victims before it's too late. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nathan and Crystal Maddox. In Colmasneil, a small town in Tyler County, Texas, with a population of just 563 people, Nathan Maddox and Kristen Westfall's relationship progressed quickly. They lived on nearby streets and shared milestones like their first love and first kiss. Despite their strong bond, Kristen's parents disapproved and tried to end the relationship. Torn between her love and her parents, Kristen initially chose her family. However, everything changed when she discovered she was pregnant. Faced with this reality, her parents decided to accept the situation and permitted the couple to marry, as single motherhood was socially unacceptable. Nathan and Kristen got married in Texas. Shortly after, they bought a house and welcomed their first child, a daughter named Madison. However, family life wasn't as idyllic as in the movies. Nathan had to work hard to support them. Owning and maintaining a house was expensive. So he took a job in Montana, away from home. As a young husband and father, he tried to visit Kristen and Madison as often as possible. He regularly sent money home, believing that he had a happy family waiting for him. He loved Kristen and Madison and thought they were the perfect little family. One day, when he returned home from Montana, he immediately noticed the house was empty. Most of the belongings were gone, and there was a note on the kitchen table. In a few brief lines, Kristen informed that she was leaving. Her reason seemed odd. She claimed she didn't know where her husband was, who he was with, or when he would return. She wrote that she was unhappy, but this was untrue because Kristen knew Nathan was in Montana for work. He called regularly to check on her and their daughter, and he sent them money regularly. The most painful part was that she took Madison with her, and Nathan was now forbidden from seeing his daughter. Kristen did something very unkind. She went to the police station and provided false information to gain full custody of her daughter, claiming that the child's father was not supportive or interested. Nathan was aware that his ex-wife and daughter had moved back to her parents' home. He made several attempts to visit his daughter Madison, but the Westfall family was firm in their refusal. They were happy to have gotten rid of an unwanted son-in-law. As time went by, Nathan moved back to his hometown to be closer to his daughter. He continued his efforts to see her and understood that he needed to work with a lawyer to gain official custody and arrange legal visitations. During this challenging time, he met with Crystal again. They had known each other since childhood, having attended school together. As teenagers, their lives took different paths. Crystal moved to the big city, dreaming of graduating from university. However, in her final year, she got married. Instead of pursuing a successful career, she enjoyed a happy family life and had 4 children. Unfortunately, over time, her marriage deteriorated, leading to a divorce. In 2011, Crystal returned to her hometown with her children. Crystal and Nathan, longtime friends, reunited at a crucial moment for both. Nathan was captivated by Crystal's children and admired how she interacted with them. Her boundless energy and optimism lit up everything around her, like a fairy. Nathan and Crystal got married in 2013. Nathan worked at the Lacken Industries warehouse, while Crystal started a small clothing business, opening a children's clothing boutique under her own name and selling handmade jewelry. The business was doing very well, which allowed them to afford a good lawyer to seek visitation rights or custody of Nathan's daughter from his first marriage. Madison was delighted with her father's new wife and her new siblings, and she felt completely happy in her father's home. This made Lita and Paula Westfall, Kristen's parents, very resentful and worried about losing their only granddaughter. In 2012, Kristen Westphal requested full custody of her daughter in court. With her parents' support, the custody battle dragged on for 2 long years. The Westphal family was hoping to gain full custody quickly, but Crystal's arrival in Nathan's life changed the whole situation. A complete family, a home, and a good job made a strong case in court, and Nathan was granted visitation rights with his daughter. In October 2013, the judge allowed Nathan and Crystal to have supervised visits with Madison. On January 18, 2014, Nathan and Crystal arrived at Mount Carmel Church for the Sunday service. After the service, they wanted to take a walk with Madison, who was 6 years old. They left the church a little ahead of the rest of the congregation to go get some gifts they had prepared for Madison from their car. A few minutes later, 3 loud gunshots rang out. Nathan and Crystal were tragically killed by gunshots to the head, shocking their small town with the brutal murder of them. Initially, the killings seemed senseless, but later investigations revealed a motive. The police conducted a thorough investigation at the scene, where they found a .30 caliber rifle and matching shell casings. The autopsy of Nathan showed he was also shot in the thigh with a 20-gauge shotgun. This discovery led investigators to believe there were 2 shooters, since it's unlikely that one person could have managed both weapons simultaneously. The investigators carried out a set of interviews with witnesses to collect information about the Maddox family and to understand what occurred. They spoke with church members, friends, and relatives of the deceased family. However, the most surprising aspect was the response from Nathan's ex-wife's family. Both Kristen and her parents, along with other witnesses, were summoned to give testimony at the police station. The attitude of this family really shocked the investigators. The Westphals played up the tragedy so much that it seemed like they were hiding their happiness about the deaths. Paul Westphal was so stunned that he had a fit. He couldn't believe the news of Nathan's death and had to call emergency services. A grown man who spent years trying to cut Nathan out of his daughter's life was so devastated he suffered a seizure. Kristen was the first person interviewed, and her interview was somewhat unsettling. She was the only family member who remained calm and composed, even though she and Nathan had been together for a long time and had a child. Kristen shared some strange details about him, focusing only on the negative aspects of her ex-husband. She claimed to know who killed him, mentioning that Nathan was involved with dangerous motorcycle gangs in Montana. One day, one of the alleged gang members showed up at Nathan's mother's house and threatened to kill him. Although the story was partly true, the threat didn't materialize because a motorcyclist inadvertently broke his bike. It was also found out that the existence of the gang had been exaggerated to throw off the investigation. Moreover, as an alibi, Kristen stated that on the day of the crime she was at the supermarket with her dad, Paul, just a few miles from the church, and then they both went home. Surveillance footage at 10:57 a.m. confirmed they were at the supermarket. Paul Westphal told exactly the same story. However, because Paul was a hunter and owned a firearm, they tested his hands for gunshot residue, but the results were negative. Still, his reaction to Nathan's death, whom he openly hated, seemed very strange to the investigators, leaving them slightly doubtful about his sincerity. Interviews with Nathan's loved ones over a short period revealed that he was in a custody battle with his ex-wife Kristen Westphal and her family over their daughter. After a long and bitter court dispute, Nathan was close to gaining custody, which the Westphal family strongly opposed. This intense conflict could have led to retaliation, but the police lacked concrete evidence to arrest anyone from the Westphal family. The family consisted of 4 people, and 2 of them could be the shooters. Investigators were still not convinced by their story and were trying to determine which family member fired the shots that killed 2 people. Regardless of whether it was a hired assassin, the investigators took a different approach and decided to focus on the main figure of the controversy, little Madison. After all, her safety was at risk, and she was still with a family that could be dangerous to her. Police officers and Child Protective Services, CPS, arrived to take the girl from the Westfalls' home, but were met with strong protests and anger. Due to the actions of the older Westfall family members, a search of the house was conducted. During this search, the police made a shocking discovery. A gun was stored on a shelf in a room where it could be easily reached. The search concluded with the discovery of illegal drugs throughout the house. In 2013, Kristen Westfall was charged and arrested for possessing a controlled substance. She faced repeated arrests, suggesting she couldn't be a fit mother to Madison. When Kristen went to jail in early 2013, her parents were given temporary custody of her daughter and did not permit Nathan to visit Madison during this period. Kristen defied Child Protective Services orders and continued living in the same house and sharing a bed with her young daughter. Even in 2014, despite court injunctions, she remained with her family and saw her daughter daily, disregarding the court's directive to move out. In March 2014, Child Protective Services got involved in the custody case of Madison, less than 2 months after the tragic murder in front of the church. Authorities arrested 4 people: Kristen Westfall, 29, her younger brother Cameron, and their parents, Paul and Letha Westfall. There was no direct evidence of their guilt in murder. The interrogations didn't yield the expected results, so the police resorted to deceptive tactics to pressure the most vulnerable member of the Westfall family, 18-year-old Cameron. If his guilt was proven, he was told that all his family members would face life imprisonment and the direct perpetrators of the murder would receive the death penalty. Cameron was young and kind-hearted. He was really scared and quickly agreed to cooperate with the investigation, revealing all the details of what had happened. The crime against Nathan and Crystal turned out to be meticulously planned by the Westfall family to completely exclude Nathan from the role of a father. The Westfalls were worried and carefully planned a scheme to keep Nathan out of Madison's life. Nathan wanted to take care of his daughter on his own, but the Westfalls were unwilling to let him see her, much less grant him permanent custody. The Westfalls were really upset that their ex-son-in-law had gotten his life together and was living well. So, when the judge allowed him multiple visits, it became clear that he might win the case. This led Kristen to come up with a plan to get rid of him once and for all. Initially, Kristen tried to hire someone to kill her ex-husband, but when that didn't work out, she decided to do it herself with her father. On Sunday afternoon, the family usually attended church, and January 18th was no different. Letha Westfall and little Madison drove to the service at the scheduled time. Afterward, Letha had to hand Madison over to her father. Meanwhile, Kristen and Paul went to a distant store and pretended to be customers to appear on CCTV cameras, trying to establish a solid alibi, but they miscalculated the timing. Each family member had a specific role to fulfill. Throughout the entire period, they communicated via text messages, updating each other on Nathan and Crystal's movements. Letha, who attended the service, informed Paul when Nathan and Crystal were about to leave the church. She also the one who called 911 immediately after the murder. Cameron played a key role in hiding the evidence. He disposed of the gun used by his sister and father to shoot the newlyweds in the head near a remote church. He drove to a lake and threw away a bag of weapons. Cameron later decided to cooperate with the authorities and revealed that Kristen initially came up with the plan, which the family followed. He also showed investigators the spot where he had thrown away the murder weapons. Divers eventually recovered these items, confirming Cameron's statement. The police arrested Kristen, Cameron, and their parents, Paul and Letha Westfall, charging them with organized crime. Kristen and Paul fired the shots, while Cameron and Letha willingly assisted them. Since Letha was at the church during the incident, she clearly did not shoot Nathan and Crystal Maddox. However, phone records revealed that she informed her daughter and spouse of the couple's location as they left the church. Although Kristen and Paul pulled the trigger, Letha and her son Cameron were knowingly involved in the crime. The trial was noisy and prolonged. Each Westphal family member was tried individually. Paul Westphal pretended to have seizures and was deemed mentally unfit, staying in a state psychiatric hospital for evaluation. In May 2014, a judge ruled Paul incompetent, but this decision was reversed 4 months later. Facing with threat the death penalty for the murders of Nathan and Crystal Maddox, Paul and Letha accepted a plea deal with the district attorney's office to avoid execution. Paul accepted a plea deal from the prosecution, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole after pleading guilty to the charges. Letha also accepted a plea deal and admitted to participating in organized criminal activity, avoiding a trial. She is currently imprisoned at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville and will be eligible for parole in 2044. At the time of her sentencing, Letha Westphal was 54 years old, which means she may spend the rest of her life in prison. Kristen is the third person from the Westphal family to be tried in this case. During the trial, she maintained her innocence against all charges. She claimed that her entire family was unstable, and she was the only one honest about it. When her family members, Letha, Paul, and Cameron, testified against her in court, she couldn't confront them directly. Kristen Westphal's final trial and sentencing started in August 2016. The reason for killing Nathan and Crystal was related to the custody of Madison. Kristen strongly opposed Nathan having unrestricted access to see Madison. She couldn't bear the thought of him being happy. Kristen wanted to manage the communication between her daughter and Nathan herself. Through their daughter, she aimed to control everything he did and felt. The trial lasted more than a week. Ultimately, with overwhelming evidence against her, the jury took 8 hours to find her guilty of capital murder. In a Brazos County courtroom, attorneys and the judge reviewed final motions for the woman. Kristen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, nearly 9 months before her father pleaded guilty and received the same sentence in May 2017. Kristen Westphal is currently serving her sentence at the William Hobby Women's Prison in Falls County, Texas. Paul, Letha, and Kristen Westphal were charged with 2 counts of murder. However, the youngest family member, Cameron, was only charged with 2 counts of tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. Cameron pleaded guilty to 2 counts of third-degree evidence tampering. The judge postponed his sentencing based on Cameron's agreement to testify against his family. He could face up to 10 years in prison for each charge. He was reportedly not involved in the shooting, and his mother was not involved either, as she was at the church when the crime happened. However, phone records indicate that she texted her husband and daughter while the Maddoxes were getting ready to go home. Cameron is currently imprisoned at the Huntsville Correctional Facility in Huntsville, Texas, and is expected to be released in 2025. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Diana D. Aiello. Diana Aiello was born in 1959 in Tustin, a suburb of Los Angeles. Her father had a military career, and her mother worked at a local garment factory. At the age of 19, Diana's life took a major turn when she met Kevin Green at a bar. She was at the bar with her friends when some men started bothering them. He was being aggressive, so Kevin decided to intervene. After Kevin chased the men away, Diana offered to buy him a drink as a thank you. A few days later, they started dating, and things went pretty fast from there. At the time, Kevin was married, but he and his wife were in the process of getting a divorce. Kevin and Diana decided to move in together, and Diana soon became pregnant. As soon as Kevin's divorce was finalized, they got married that same day, eagerly awaiting the birth of their daughter. They rented an apartment in a small apartment complex in Tustin. Kevin worked as a helicopter mechanic at a nearby Marine Corps base, while Diana had previously worked at her mother's garment factory. However, because she was pregnant, she chose to stay home and prepare for the arrival of her daughter. By the end of September 1979, Diana was close to giving birth and could go into labor at any moment. On the evening of September 30th, after a night of watching a movie together, Diana and her husband had a disagreement. The impending birth of their child was causing them stress and they were constantly arguing. To calm down and avoid escalating the situation, Kevin decided to drive to a nearby fast food restaurant. About 40 minutes later, Kevin contacted the local police department, reporting a heartbreaking situation. His wife had been shot and needed immediate assistance by ambulance. At that time, a patrol car was nearby and the police quickly arrived at the scene. When they entered the apartment, they found Diana lying on the bed in the bedroom, covered in blood, apparently from a head wound similar to a gunshot wound. The bedroom wall was also covered in blood. Diana was showing signs of life, struggling to breathe, so the police began first aid while they waited for the ambulance. They also asked Kevin to leave the room because they were still unsure of what had happened. When paramedics arrived, they carefully loaded Diana into the ambulance for further medical attention. Initially, the paramedics suspected that Diana had been shot, but it was later determined that her injuries were actually blunt force trauma. Kevin wanted to go with his wife, but the police would not allow it. They needed him to give a statement, and at that time, they were investigating every possible scenario, including the possibility that Kevin was involved in the attack. Kevin, in shock, did not understand what the police were saying, even tried to get into the ambulance that was leaving, forcing the police to intervene and stop him. Kevin regained his composure and then explained the events of that night to the police. He had an argument with his wife and decided to leave the apartment to calm down. He drove to a fast food restaurant to buy some burgers. As he left the apartment, he realized he had left his keys inside but decided not to go back to get them. Instead, he closed the door and walked to his car. While driving, he noticed a truck nearby with the back door open. Kevin reported seeing an African-American man parking the truck near their apartment complex. At around 2 a.m., Kevin decided to stop by his favorite fast food joint, but the line was too crowded, which discouraged him. So he chose another location of the same chain nearby. About 40 minutes later, after buying some burgers, he arrived home to find the front door wide open. This was unusual. Kevin rushed inside and heard strange noises. When he entered the bedroom, he was shocked to see Diana lying in a pool of blood and struggling to breathe. Kevin immediately called the police for help. Kevin's story was somewhat confusing and raised many questions. Going out for a burger in the middle of the night seemed unusual. It took him about 40 minutes to make the trip, which was quite long considering all the restaurants were close to his home. The police checked the fast food bag and found the food was still warm. The receipt contained the restaurant's address and time of purchase, which matched Kevin's account. After verifying this, the police allowed Kevin to go to the hospital, but first, they requested a blood sample to compare with traces of blood found at the crime scene. When Diana arrived at the hospital, doctors examined her head wound and determined that it was not caused by a gunshot. Instead, it appeared that her attacker had used a small, heavy object, such as a piece of wood, to hit her multiple times. Diana soon fell into a coma at the hospital, prompting doctors to work urgently to save both her and her unborn child. After several tense hours, they were able to stabilize Diana, but she still needed surgery. During this time, the police asked medical professionals to evaluate whether Diana had been sexually assaulted. The examination was part of standard investigative procedures, and the position in which Diana was found prompted the police to consider the possibility. Experts confirmed that there were traces of semen on her body. However, Kevin told the police that he had had sex with Diana just hours before the argument, and that DNA analysis results were not yet available at that time. Therefore, even with a biological sample from the perpetrator, there was not much that could be done. Kevin and Diana's family waited anxiously at the hospital overnight, hoping that Diana and her baby would pull through. However, in a tragic turn of events, the baby's condition suddenly worsened the next morning. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save the baby. Diana underwent emergency surgery shortly after the baby's death and her condition stabilized. Although she remained in a coma, chances of survival were relatively high. And the medical team hope that she can recover and return to normal life after such a serious injury. Meanwhile, the police are trying to identify the person who attacked Diana. After the baby's death, the case was reclassified as a homicide, causing the local police department to allocate all available resources to solve the case. Although Kevin provided an alibi, the police were not quick to rule him out as a suspect. His story raised many questions. He had argued with his wife just hours before the attack, left the front door unlocked, and was absent for an extended period of time during a trip to the fast food restaurant. However, there was no evidence against Kevin. His claim of seeing a suspicious man near his home in the middle of the night led the police to another suspect. About a year before this case, crimes with a similar modus operandi began occurring in and around Tustin. In December 1978, a 17-year-old girl was the victim of a fatal break-in and assault. The perpetrator broke into her apartment, beat her with a wooden object, and sexually assaulted her. 4 months later, a similar case occurred. A 21-year-old woman was killed in her own home after being beaten with a piece of wood by an intruder. In July 1979, an unknown perpetrator broke into another woman's apartment and did the same to her, her injuries leaving her in a coma for several weeks. She eventually recovered. However, her testimony did not provide any new leads for the police to catch the perpetrator. In September 1979, less than a month before Diana's attack, a similar series of events occurred to a 31-year-old woman who died the following day. All of the cases had striking similarities, leading the police to suspect that they were dealing with a serial killer, similar to the one who attacked Diana. The police focused all their efforts on capturing this individual, who had earned the nickname the Bedroom Destroyer. Due to the short time between the cases and the fact that the perpetrator was operating in a relatively small suburb of Los Angeles, the police believed that he might strike again soon. The police decided to issue a public warning through the media, warning all women living alone, especially those living in ground-floor apartments, as they appeared to be the serial killer's primary targets. The announcement caused widespread panic, prompting many women to purchase self-defense products, sign up for self-defense classes, and temporarily move in with friends or family for safety. The police interviewed anyone who might have had any connection to the crimes, and they soon received their first leads. Several of the victims' neighbors reported seeing a suspicious white man with thick black hair near their home. Although the description was vague, the police found several men who matched and investigated them, but got nowhere. 7 days after Diana was attacked, doctors updated her family on her condition. She had regained consciousness, but unfortunately, her recovery was fraught with complications. Diana was unable to speak or recall her memories because her brain functioned at the level of a normal 6-year-old. Her brain needed time to recover. During this time, a similar incident occurred in Tustin. A 24-year-old woman was brutally attacked in her apartment by an unknown assailant, who beat her with a wooden object and sexually assaulted her. Sadly, the woman's injuries were fatal. Despite their efforts, the police were unable to arrest the perpetrator. Diana spent several more days in the hospital, and her mind gradually returned to normal. Despite this progress, she still struggled with severe memory loss and could not remember her parents. doctors informed her family that her memory might recover over time, but they advised against reminding her of anything and instead letting her remember on her own once her health stabilized. When Diana was well enough, she was discharged and her family took her home. Because Kevin had to continue working on the military base to support the family financially, they decided to move in with Diana's parents, who could care for her around the clock. 6 weeks after the attack, Diana was still attending physical therapy sessions and her condition was gradually improving. She still couldn't speak or remember what had happened to her, but that all changed suddenly 6 weeks after the attack. When her therapist brought up the attack and asked if Diana remembered anything about her attacker, Diana responded in surprise, nodding and pointing to her wedding ring, a sudden revelation that took her doctor by surprise. When Diana's mother came to pick her up, the doctor told her about this, and the mother asked her daughter, "Was it Kevin who attacked you?" Diana nodded. Right after that, her mother took her to the police station, where she spoke with the lead detective. He asked Diana a few more questions, and she confirmed that she suddenly remembered the moment of the attack and that the perpetrator was none other than her husband. For the detective, this completely changed the course of the case. He and his team were almost certain that Diana was attacked by the same serial criminal responsible for the other similar attacks. But now the detective faced several questions. Could Kevin be the bedroom basher? He lived in the same area where the attacks happened and even matched the description provided by several witnesses who saw a white man with dark hair. Or did Kevin decide to get rid of his wife by disguising himself as the active killer? Considering that all the actions of the bedroom basher were almost identical each single time, it wouldn't have been difficult. The detective thought that if he arrested Kevin now, his involvement in other crimes might never be proven, and Kevin himself could flee as soon as he realized he was caught. So he made a difficult decision. He asked Diana and her mother to pretend that Diana still remembered nothing and to return home to Kevin. This was obviously a huge challenge for both of them, but they agreed nonetheless. Investigators put Kevin under surveillance and closely monitored all his movements, hoping to eventually link him to other attacks. Police spoke with Kevin's friends to learn more about the suspect. And they quickly found out something interesting. Those who knew him well said that his relationship with Diana was quite tense. The couple argued frequently, a fact also confirmed by neighbors who often heard their screams. According to friends, Kevin regularly complained to them that Diana refused to be intimate with him in the final months of her pregnancy. Yet Kevin had described his relationship with Diana to detectives as nearly perfect. But besides that, detectives couldn't gather any additional useful information. Kevin behaved quite normally. He went to work and came back home without lingering anywhere else and didn't raise any suspicions. The police also received results from the lab revealing an interesting discovery. Besides the attacker's semen, they found skin particles with blood under Diana's nails. Specialists matched the blood type of the attacker to Kevin's blood sample, and it matched. It meant that Kevin had the same blood type as the person who attacked Diana. Based on this information, detectives came up with the most likely version of what had happened on that fateful night. Kevin indeed bought burgers at a fast food joint a few miles from home. The time on the receipt and cashier's words confirmed his presence. So, the detectives believed he could have attacked Diana before leaving home, then quickly went to the fast food restaurant to create an alibi explaining the extended 40-minute trip. Regarding motive, detectives theorized that Diana's refusal to engage in intimacy served as the trigger. Despite Kevin's claim that they had had sex hours before the incident, he frequently complained to friends about Diana's reluctance for months. Given the severity of the attack, detectives believed this was Kevin's breaking point. The police re-interviewed Diana, who confirmed she vividly remembered the attack and that Kevin was indeed the one who assaulted her. During the conversation, her mother said they could no longer pretend and live under the same roof as Kevin. The police decided to arrest Kevin without arresting him at Diana's home, to avoid endangering her family. Instead, they arrested him at a store. Despite his arrest, Kevin maintained his innocence, claiming that everything happened exactly as he told them. As the trial proceeded, preparations took nearly 10 months to complete. During this time, Diana's health gradually improved, allowing her to regain her ability to speak, albeit with some difficulty. Diana was examined by multiple doctors, all of whom agreed that her brain had recovered and that she was now a credible witness. In court, Diana positively identified her husband as her attacker that night. However, Kevin's defense team argued that he was innocent, claiming that he was at a fast food restaurant at the time of the incident. Unfortunately for Kevin, Diana's testimony was stronger than his alibi, resulting in a guilty verdict. As a result, in November 1980, Kevin was convicted of murdering his child and assaulting Diana. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In the wake of Kevin's possible involvement in the serial killings, the police noticed something interesting. Before Kevin was arrested, there had been 2 more similar cases in their county. But both victims survived. They had not yet been able to identify the attacker, so his identity remained unknown. But after Kevin was arrested, the attack suddenly stopped. Before that, the bedroom wrecker had committed crimes quite frequently, sometimes only a few weeks apart. However, after Kevin was arrested, there were no more similar cases. After the verdict, Diana filed for divorce, and Kevin did not object. Diana then focused on recovering her health, but her progress was slow due to the severity of her injuries. She lost some of her hearing and vision, and she was having difficulty speaking. Meanwhile, Kevin never gave up on his claim of innocence, even after many years had passed. However, life in prison was extremely difficult for him. Fellow inmates often targeted him because he was convicted of murdering a child, which led to him being hospitalized several times. Kevin applied for parole but was denied by the board. He continued to receive 3 more denials in the following years. The main reason for these decisions was Kevin's refusal to plead guilty, which was seen as a lack of remorse. When DNA analysis became a standard tool in forensic science, Kevin requested that his DNA be compared to existing samples. However, his request was denied because he could not afford the analysis. In 1996, the police department reopened the investigation into a series of attacks believed to have been committed by the bedroom basher. During this time, semen samples taken from the victims' bodies were stored in a laboratory. Now, the police had a chance to identify the perpetrator behind all of these crimes. Kevin was still considered the prime suspect, but DNA analysis revealed something surprising. When experts compared the DNA profile, the semen samples matched the DNA of another man, a man named Gerald Parker. Gerald was arrested the same year as Kevin. His crime involved the attack on a 13-year-old girl in Tustin, and he was arrested shortly thereafter. Initially, the police did not link this case to the other series of attacks because of the different attack methods. The bedroom basher typically targeted his victims at night while they were in their apartments, while Parker attacked the girl on the street. He has since served his sentence in prison and is expected to be released in a few days. After police got a DNA match for Gerald in the unsolved cases, they re-examined the Diana attack. Although the crime was considered solved, police still considered Diana's case to be connected to the serial killer cases. They now understood that Kevin was definitely not a serial killer, leaving them with only one question: did he really attack his wife? Gerald was stationed at the same military base as Kevin and owned a dark-colored truck during that time. Notably, on the day of the incident, Kevin reported to police that he saw an African-American man near a dark-colored truck outside their home. This statement led police to consider the possibility that Parker may have been involved in the attack on Diana. The local prosecutor visited Kevin in prison and updated him on the progress of the bedroom basher murder investigation. During the visit, the prosecutor asked Kevin to provide a direct DNA sample for analysis. Kevin, who had been trying to do this for years, immediately agreed. While the experts were analyzing Kevin's DNA, the police went to see Gerald in prison. At that time, they had not yet charged him with the series of attacks, because they needed time to prepare such a complex case. However, the police decided to talk to Gerald, hoping that he might confess. Gerald initially denied any involvement in the series of crimes. To get more information, the police changed the subject and asked him about the attack on Diana. Before proceeding with the interrogation, they reviewed his file and discovered an important detail. After being arrested for attacking the girl, he told the police that military service was the best thing that had ever happened to him. The police took advantage of this information, questioning how he could have let another soldier take responsibility for his crimes. They continued to pressure him by appealing to his loyalty to the army. This strategy eventually yielded a breakthrough when Gerald surprisingly revealed that another man was actually serving time for the murder he had committed. Gerald admitted that he had driven to Kevin's house in his truck that night. His intention was to explore the neighborhood in his truck, looking into ground floor windows for potential victims, as he had done many times before. However, when he arrived, he heard screaming coming from Kevin and Diana's apartment, and when a man walked out, Gerald noticed that the man had left the door unlocked when he left. After waiting for a few minutes, Gerald entered the apartment and attacked Diana. He said he had not known Diana's husband before, as they had been on different assignments at the military base. Gerald confessed to several crimes, including 6 murders and 3 non-fatal assaults, in addition to the crimes for which Kevin had been wrongly convicted. DNA testing confirmed Gerald's guilt and Kevin's innocence, supporting Gerald's confession. The prosecutor promised to overturn his conviction as soon as possible, and a few days later, Kevin was released after 16 years in prison. The development caused public outrage, not only because an innocent man had been wrongly imprisoned for nearly half his life, but also because it took the police so long to identify the real culprit. After Kevin was released, the state of California paid him $10,000 in restitution. A few years later, he received an additional $100 per day payment for his time in prison, totaling $620,000. But the story doesn't end there. Even though Kevin was completely exonerated, Diana still refused to believe in his innocence. Up until that point, she had claimed that Kevin was the only one who attacked her. However, after biological material from her body matched Gerald's DNA, she came up with a different story. Diana said she was attacked and assaulted by Kevin, who then left, followed by Gerald. However, Gerald claimed that when he entered the apartment, Diana was lying on the bed without any injuries or signs of distress, and he admitted to hitting her on the head. Diana's family offered another explanation. Kevin may have colluded with Gerald to commit the crime, which would explain why Kevin left the house with the door open. Gerald, on the other hand, repeatedly denied knowing Kevin, pointing out that the military base was home to many people who did not know each other. Kevin also insisted that he had nothing to do with Gerald and vowed that he would never harm Diana or their unborn child. He insisted that his only mistake was leaving the door open because he did not want to go back to get the keys immediately after an argument with his wife, a decision that still haunts him. Diana maintained her version of events, and one reason may have been the severe trauma she suffered during the attack. The trauma had a profound impact on her brain. When Diana awoke from her coma, doctors advised her family not to inform her of what had happened, as her brain was extremely sensitive to new information at that time. She would treat any details provided as real and accurate memories. It is worth noting that even at the time of Kevin's release, 16 years after the incident, she continued to experience severe post-traumatic stress. This suggests that the effects of the trauma had affected her brain beyond repair. It is also possible that the trauma was the main reason she convicted Kevin of involvement. Gerald Parker was sentenced to death in 1999, but the death penalty has not yet been carried out. Instead, due to California's moratorium on the death penalty, Gerald remains in prison to serve his sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Turpin family. David Allen Turpin was born on October 17, 1961, in Princeton, West Virginia, to Betty and James Turpin. He grew up in a deeply religious family. As a student at Princeton High School, David was actively involved in several extracurricular activities, including the Bible Club, Chess Club, Science Club, and a cappella chorus. After graduating from high school, he attended Virginia Tech University in Blacksburg, Virginia, where he studied electrical engineering. Notably, David demonstrated exceptional skills in computer engineering, which eventually led him to secure employment at prominent defense technology companies such as Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. Louise Anna Turpin was born on May 24, 1968, in Princeton, West Virginia. She was the oldest of 6 children to parents Phyllis and Wayne Robinette. Her father was a preacher and her mother worked at Walmart and singing in their church choir. However, Louise's childhood was extremely painful. Her parents often argued, which resulted in them treating their 6 children very poorly. Louise, her younger sisters, and her mother were sexually abused as children by a family member, a traumatic experience. This dark family secret was hidden for years but was later revealed by Louise's younger sisters. Despite facing their own distress, Louise was protective by shielding her younger siblings from their abuser and comforting them during their parents' intense conflicts. Her younger sister Elizabeth described her as gentle, compassionate, and caring, always working to comfort them during this difficult time. When Louise was 15 years old, she met 22-year-old David Turpin at church, and then they started dating each other. Since they feared Louise's parents might not approve, they decided to keep their relationship private. After her mother, Phyllis, found out about the relationship, she initially had concerns but eventually accepted David and Louise's bond. This was partly because David came from a Christian family and partly due to Louise's reassurances. However, they still keep this relationship a secret from Louise's father, Wayne, as they were aware that he might be very upset if he found out. 5 years after graduating from Princeton High School, 23-year-old David visited the school where Louise was a student. He managed to convince the school staff to let him take Louise out of class. Louise willingly left with David, and they set off on a journey south to get married in secret. Their plan was to elope without telling anyone. When Louise's parents found out she was missing, they contacted the authorities. However, before the authorities can catch up with them, the couple had already reached Texas, where they intended to get married without anyone knowing. Surprisingly, David and Louise agreed to return to West Virginia without resistance. When they arrived, they thought that Wayne and Phyllis would be angry, but instead, they received a calm reaction. Initially, Wayne was angry with Phyllis for allowing their daughter to be in a relationship with David, but he eventually understood that he couldn't separate 2 people in love. Wayne eventually gave in and consented to their marriage. The couple got married in a simple ceremony in Petersburg, Virginia, on February 11, 1985. 2 years later, Wayne and Phyllis got divorced, and Wayne started working as the chief deputy assessor in Mercia County. After her marriage, Louise began to drift away from her family. Free from her parents' rules, she was happy to start her own independent life. In 1988, Louise and her family welcomed their first child, a daughter. 18 months later, in 1990, they had another child. When David got a job transfer with General Dynamics, the family moved to Fort Worth, Texas, and settled in the modern neighborhood of Meadow Creek. With David's high-paying job, the Turpins enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle. To show off their new wealth, Louise invited her family from West Virginia to visit. Since she grew up without much money, Louise wanted to share her new success with her family. David and Louise kindly paid for their family's travel and accommodation expenses during the visit. In 1991, the Turpin family had a son, bringing them more joy. However, the family struggled with significant debt by 1992, despite David's high income. Instead of cutting back on spending, they continue to live a lavish lifestyle and continue to have more children. In 1993, Louise got pregnant with her fourth child, a girl. Every year, Louise's family visited the Turpins, but they didn't know the Turpins were struggling financially. To keep up appearances, Louise took care of all expenses during her family's visits, hiding their financial problems. In 1994, the Turpin family's eldest daughter started first grade at Meadow Creek Elementary. Her greasy and messy hair, dirty clothes, and poor hygiene suggested that she was being neglected by her parents. As a result, her classmates teased her and made fun of her for being dirty. The following year, 1995, the Turpin family had one more son. In 1996, they took a family trip to visit Louise's relatives. At the time, the Turpins were struggling financially, but they didn't seem to worry about it and continued to spend a lot of money, taking their relatives out to expensive meals. In the summer of 1996, Elizabeth, Louise's sister, traveled with the Turpin family to their home in Fort Worth for the holidays. During the trip, the family stopped at a casino in Louisiana, where Louise and David left Elizabeth in charge of the children while they gambled. Louise asked Elizabeth to keep their activities a secret. However, Louise's gamble was in direct conflict with her Christian upbringing, which taught her that gambling was morally wrong. Unfortunately, their gamble ended in losses, which led to a fierce argument between David and Louise. David believed Louise had a gambling problem and blamed her for their financial struggles. During her stay with the Turpin family, Elizabeth witnessed the family's disturbing dynamics firsthand. David and Louise showed little affection towards their children and controlled nearly every aspect of their lives. Simple tasks like using the restroom or eating required permission from David and Louise. Moreover, Elizabeth found David's behavior especially unsettling. He regularly entered the bathroom while she was showering, watching her and making her feeling discomfort and uncomfortable. The Turpin family's problems started to worsen in 1997. In May of that year, they had another child. However, in September, concerns about her oldest daughter's health began to emerge. She was dirty and showed signs of possible sexual abuse. As a result, she was taken to the principal's office to talk about her home life. Unfortunately, no action was taken to address her situation. The family had another child in 1998, increasing their number to 6. Despite David's high-paying job, the family fell deeply into debt due to their frequent gambling. This led to significant financial difficulties. In 1999, the eldest daughter stopped attending school, followed by the other children. The parents claimed they were homeschooling, but this was not true. The bank foreclosed on the family's Fort Worth home in 1998, forcing the Turpins to move to a less populated area in Rio Vista, Texas. However, the new house was kept in a disgusting state. The owners who moved in after the Turpins reported finding dirt stains and a foul smell, suggesting the presence of feces. Before moving to the Rio Vista house, the family had their 7th child. Between 2001 and 2007, the Turpin family had 5 more children, bringing the total to 13. As time went on, the parents' neglect turned into physical abuse. They would hit, slap, choke, and whip their children for minor reasons such as using the bathroom without permission. Shockingly, the children were only allowed to bathe once a year. The children were also malnourished. David and Louise bought delicious food, but they know to let their children eat it. Instead, they made their kids watch as they left the food untouched, leaving the children to suffer from hunger. This was a heartbreaking and inhumane situation that would have a profound impact on the children's lives. The children were severely malnourished due to being fed cheap frozen meals, leading to stunted physical growth and pale complexions that made them appear younger than their actual age. Additionally, the lack of social interaction and emotional abuse significantly impacted their mental development. In 2004, the Turpin family moved to a nicer trailer, leaving behind their previous home in Rio Vista. This decision was made because their old house had become uninhabitable due to the overwhelming amount of trash and dead rodents. In 2008, Louise had a conversation with her younger sister Teresa that left her stunned. Louise, 40, revealed that she and her husband David no longer attended church, a huge change from their family's strict Christian upbringing. Instead, David and Louise became interested in Satanism and used Ouija boards. Louise also confessed that them was involved in swinging, which meant they had sex with other couples they met online. What's more, they would often leave their younger children at home with their older siblings while they met strangers online. It became clear that Louise was the primary participant in these activities, with David acting as her accomplice by providing transportation and waiting for her during the encounters. This big change in her sister, Louise, from a caring and responsible person to someone almost unrecognizable, was deeply disturbing to Teresa. Meanwhile, the Turpin family moved to Marietta and made frequent visits to Disneyland, where they took many happy photos in matching outfits. Louise sent these photos to her family, with whom she had limited contact through Skype, and kept the children isolated from them. The photos reassured Louise's family that the children seemed to be in good spirits, despite appearing underweight. David and Louise had a strong fascination with Disneyland. This is evident from that they have come here many times. And they have recorded these experiences through photographs. In 2014, the family relocated to Peru, California, about 20 miles north of Paris, previously mentioned as Marietta. By this point, the abuse and violence against the children had become to extreme levels. David and Louise restrained the children to their beds using ropes, and if they tried to escape, they would replace the ropes with chains and padlocks. The children were forced to spend around 20 hours a day locked in their room, surrounded by a foul smell that filled the air. In 2015, the family had their 13th and final child. The family took a trip to Las Vegas to celebrate David and Louise's 30th wedding anniversary. They chose to renew their vows at the Elvis Chapel, which was a stark contrast to the abuse the children suffered at home. One of their children, 17 years old, found the courage to escape through a window and call the police to report the abuse. During the 20-minute 911 call, the girl described the terrible living conditions and the many abuses she and her siblings endured. She had photographic evidence and waited for the police to arrive. When they got there, they found a malnourished girl who looked much younger than her age. The girl gave the police pictures of the inside of the house. The police discovered the dark secrets the family had kept hidden. When police officers entered the house, they were immediately hit with a strong, foul smell that made it difficult to breathe. Despite the overpowering odor, they continued their search and were shocked by what they found. 3 of the younger children were chained to their beds. The house was extremely dirty and filled with trash, and the children did not have access to basic necessities like bathrooms. The police quickly took the younger children to the Riverside University Medical Center for care, while the older children were taken to the Corona Regional Medical Center for evaluation and treatment. On January 14, 2018, the authorities arrested David and Louise Turpin, accusing them of child abuse and torture. 4 days later, the couple was formally charged with multiple crimes, including 12 counts of torture, 7 counts of abusing a dependent adult, 6 counts of child abuse and neglect, and 12 counts of false imprisonment, with these charges applied to both David and Louise equally. Also faced a separate charge for engaging in a lewd act with a minor under the age of 14. Notably, among the Turpin children, the 2-year-old was unique in showing no apparent signs of abuse or torture. The Turpin children suffered severe physical and emotional abuse. The parents physically harmed them, including throwing them down the stairs, which resulted in nerve damage. The children lacked basic knowledge about life, further highlights the neglect they suffered. Although the parents bought toys for them, they were not allowed to play with these toys. The children's sleep was also severely restricted. They had to stay awake late into the night, often until 4 or 5 a.m., and were not permitted to go to bed before then. On January 24, 2018, the judge ordered David and Louise to have no direct contact with their children for 3 years. Any communication would have to be through their lawyers. A few months later, on June 21, 2018, the court decided there was enough evidence to put David and Louise on trial. Finally, on February 22, 2019, David and Louise changed their pleas, both pleading guilty to a total of 14 charges, including torture, abuse of dependent adults, false imprisonment, and dangerous for children. In a surprising turn of events, the court proceedings brought about an emotional reunion between the parents and their children. According to the children's statements, they had forgiven their parents and still loved them. Each child expressed concern for their parents' well-being and shared that they were doing well in their new lives. David and Louise, overcome with emotion, apologized sincerely for their past actions and expressed their deep love for their children, wishing them success and happiness. David and Louise was given a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As of March 2022, Louise, who is 53 years old, and David, who is 60 years old, are both eligible for parole in 2037. The severe abuse and neglect in the Turpin household shocked the community and left many questioning why it went undetected for so long. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michael Redlich. Danielle Redlich, born in Florida in 1976, Danielle's family moved to Cleveland, Ohio when she was a child. Her childhood was unremarkable, as she grew up to be a kind, polite, and creative person. As the eldest child, Danielle developed an appreciation for beauty and pursued higher education. She attended Valencia College, earning an Associate of Arts degree, before continuing her studies in psychology at Baldwin Wallace University. In 1996, Danielle's mother, Caitlin Aquino, remarried. However, the marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. Caitlin later passed away from cancer. It turned out that she had been battling breast cancer for a long time. Before the marriage, Caitlin did not have health insurance, so she married her partner primarily to get comprehensive coverage for her medical treatment. Even with high-quality care, the cancer treatment was not successful. After Caitlin passed away, her husband, Michael Redlich, became a single father of the children and, struggling to care for them alone, sought help from Caitlin's eldest child, Danielle. Danielle was now 22 years old and, after the death of her mother, Caitlin, Danielle gave up her independent life and moved into a single household with her younger brother, younger sister, and stepfather, Michael Redlich. Danielle moved in with her stepfather and helped care for the younger siblings and worked part-time at night. During their time together, Danielle and Michael fell in love and eventually married. While Michael pursued a professional sports career, specifically recruiting players. As they spent more time together, Michael became closer to his children and felt comfortable with Danielle. In return, Danielle saw him as a reliable source of support. Danielle and Michael later became husband and wife. Despite their 20-year age difference, they interacted comfortably, not minding the age gap or social status. Over time, their relationship deepened and they gradually became closer. However, Danielle was initially hesitant to share their relationship with her family, choosing to keep it a secret for a while. Michael's life took a significant turn for the better with Danielle. Both felt rejuvenated, he was full of energy, and she was loved and protected. Thanks to his connections, Michael was able to secure her a job at an advertising agency. It paid well and everything went smoothly for the couple. However, an opportunity soon came up for Michael, who was offered the position of vice president of sales for the Memphis Grizzlies basketball team. The problem was that this job required moving to another state. He did not hesitate to ask Danielle to come with him, but she hesitated. With her studies and comfortable lifestyle, she did not want to change her life. Although she initially refused to move, their relationship remained strong and the couple continued to see each other despite the distance. Michael showed Danielle the house he had bought for them in a picturesque area along the Mississippi River. The quiet and cozy neighborhood immediately caught her attention. Danielle decides to move in with Michael and he helps her find a job in radio. Their life starts off seemingly smoothly, but troubling problems begin to arise when Michael's job changes. Michael's stressful work situation. His new position comes with increased responsibilities and pressure, as well as tension with management. As a result, Michael feels overwhelmed, stressed, and exhausted. Michael often turns to alcohol as a way to relieve stress, but this gradually becomes a daily habit. As a result, he often stays up late, comes home drunk and irritable, which puts a significant strain on the family atmosphere. Danielle tries to be supportive and understanding of her husband's difficulties, and initially, after calm conversations with her, Michael seems to calm down and promises to quit drinking. However, these promises are short-lived. Tensions escalated when Michael failed to show up for the dinner they had planned together. Not the first time this had happened, but this time they had specifically arranged to spend the evening together. Danielle was upset and said that if he couldn't make time for her, he should have warned her so she could make other plans. As she walked towards the door, she made an ill-timed joke that unintentionally upset Michael. In a shocked reaction, he slapped her across the face, causing her to stumble backwards. The slap was so hard that she became disoriented and bled. When she noticed the blood splattered on her clothes and the floor, she was so shocked that she backed away from her husband. Michael immediately apologized and began to cry. Faced with the serious injuries his wife suffered, he quickly sought help by taking her to a trusted sports doctor. The doctor examined her and gave her first aid. The doctor noticed that her front tooth was chipped and recommended that she see a dentist for further examination due to the severity of the injury. After the argument, Michael made amends by planning a special and thoughtful dinner. His efforts earned his wife, Danielle, forgiveness, and as a result, she chose not to report the incident. This decision may have been influenced by the state's strict domestic violence laws, as she sympathized with her husband and decided not to cause him any more trouble. However, this was not the first time Michael had displayed disturbing behavior. Danielle had experienced similar incidents with him when they lived in Cleveland. During this time, Michael often became jealous when Danielle's ex-boyfriend visited her. One evening, Michael made some sarcastic comments about her ex-boyfriend while they were driving home, causing Danielle to react in a similar manner. In the heat of the moment, Michael hit Danielle but quickly apologized, claiming that his actions were due to hurt feelings. Danielle chose to forgive Michael, partly blaming herself for what had happened. Over time, the incident was forgotten, as some things that happen in relationships are considered a normal part of life. In 2003, Danielle's family welcomed the birth of their daughter Jaden, marking a memorable milestone in their lives. A year later, they decided to formalize their relationship. Everything was going well, however, Michael faced challenges in his career due to a change in management, which prevented him from getting the promotion he wanted. 7 years later, the family expanded with the birth of a son named Sawyer. The parents were completely focused on raising their children. If it weren't for Michelle's job and the stress it caused, family life would have been perfect. However, Michael's job led to more frequent conflicts and he started drinking again. During an argument, he grabbed Danielle by the neck and pinned her against the wall, scaring her. This time, his wife could not stand the rude behavior, so she packed her things, took the children and moved in with relatives. Michael visited her several times, apologized and asked her to come home. After a while, their relationship was repaired. Danielle's family went through a period of instability. In the following years, her family moved several times. Michael received a job offer in California, where they lived for about 5 years, but this time it was not successful. Michael continued to struggle with personal problems and his excessive drinking. At one point, both he and his wife lost their jobs, forcing them to rely on savings for financial support. In 2014, the family faced another move, this time to Indiana. Although the move was difficult, it brought the promise of a new home and a fresh start. To make the transition smoother, Michael moved to Indiana first, while Danielle and the children remained in California. This temporary separation gave them time to sell their old home and belongings. However, the frequent moves took a toll on the family, especially the children, who had a hard time adjusting to their constantly changing surroundings. The entire process took a year, during which time the family's financial situation improved. But the couple's relationship changed. The distance and infrequent meetings took their toll, and Danielle and Michael became distant and barely communicated. When the couple finally reunited, they faced new problems. Danielle began to suspect Michael of having an affair, his attitude became cold and distant, and the previous affection faded. However, Michael confessed that his age and health were the reasons. He had been embarrassed to mention this before, fearing that he would lose his younger wife. Danielle was moved by Michael's honesty and continued to support him. The couple decided to undergo a course of hormone injections. Testosterone injections rejuvenated Michael physically and mentally. He seemed younger, regaining his former energy and vitality. However, the treatment also made him more aggressive. One evening, after watching a movie together, Michael fell asleep and Danielle went upstairs to rest. The next morning, Michael woke up, went into the bathroom where Danielle was brushing her teeth, and hit her on the head. His excuse for the outburst was that Danielle had not woken him up the night before. After the fight, she told him that she was fed up with his actions and was leaving. This angered Michael, who became violent and strangled her. Danielle was unable to defend herself and began to lose consciousness. At one point, she felt like she was going to die. After a while, Danielle regained consciousness and found her husband standing over her. He was scared and confused, begging for forgiveness. Danielle could only crawl away silently. After the incident, they continued to live together and raise their children together, but from then on, their relationship changed completely. It was clear that the time had come for them to go back. The man began to drink more and more, and tensions in the family increased, with arguments breaking out even over the smallest things. Michael's frustration increasingly turned into physical aggression, but Danielle stayed with him, although she was unhappy and increasingly resentful of her husband. She still loved him deeply, which made her reluctant to leave. The ongoing situation had a profound impact on Danielle. She became increasingly anxious and irritable, leading her to withdraw from social interactions. To distract herself, she turned to photography as a hobby. By the end of 2014, Danielle's family had finally settled into their life in Florida. Michael, exhausted by the stress of his previous job, decided to change careers. He accepted a position as Director of External and Cooperative Programs at the University of Central Florida and began teaching. Although his income was lower than what he had earned in the NBA, the job provided him with joy and stability. Initially, the family rented a house, but after a year they eventually bought their own home in the Winter Park area. Their new home was a Mediterranean-style estate with ample space. Danielle loved the attic, where she often retreated. She often slept there overnight, especially when Michael was in a rage. Michael's testosterone injections had a positive impact on his personal life with Danielle. But his behavior during these intimate moments was still harsh. Their relationship continued to be strained. As a result, Danielle turned to alcohol for comfort. While Michael worked to support the family financially, Danielle took care of the home and children. However, her increasing isolation and the couple's constant arguments eventually led to their separation in 2016. Despite their separation, Michael remained in touch with the children and continued to provide financial support. Danielle found a new job at a school and began to rebuild her life, developing friendships and regaining her independence. Meanwhile, she remained in contact with Michael, allowing him to visit the family home whenever he wanted. Unfortunately, during one of these visits, a violent argument broke out, leaving Danielle hospitalized with brain damage. Fearing the consequences for Michael, she chose not to reveal the truth about the incident. Michael mistook Danielle's silence for acceptance, but it was just a cover. In early October 2016, Michael attempted to run her over with his car, and her life was only saved because she jumped into the bushes at the right time. This prompted Danielle to file a police report, but when the police began to demand more details, she recanted her statement and left the station. The couple later reconciled and moved in together, a decision that ultimately proved fateful for both of them. At approximately 9 a.m. on January 12, 2019, Danielle called 911, reporting that her husband, Michael, had suffered a heart attack and needed assistance. When emergency crews arrived at the scene, they immediately smelled a strong chemical odor coming from the living room. A bucket of pink liquid was also found near the scene. However, the rescue team soon discovered that Michael Redlich had not died of a heart attack as his wife had suggested. Instead, they found him lying on the floor in a pool of blood, the victim of a fatal stab wound. Danielle Redlich was also found at the scene, with a cut to her wrist. Paramedics treated her before taking her to hospital for further care. As police began to examine the scene, they were certain that Michael Redlich was dead. There was no way he could have inflicted such a fatal wound on himself. Forensic analysis later confirmed that the blood found in the home was Michael's. Although someone had attempted to clean it up, the effort was not thorough. Police still found blood stains in the corners of the room and on the walls, indicating that the body had been moved from the bedroom to the living room. In addition, they discovered a large knife near the kitchen entrance and 3 smaller knives in the sink, indicating that the cleanup attempt was unsuccessful. Danielle was questioned by police shortly after a doctor confirmed that her injuries were not life-threatening. During the interview, her statements were inconsistent and contradictory. At first, she said that she thought her husband, Michael, had died of heart disease. She later changed her story, claiming that he had committed suicide after a heated argument. However, forensic experts disputed her claim, pointing out that the nature of the injuries made it unlikely that a person would have inflicted the injuries on themselves. Usually, people who try to end their lives choose a simpler and less painful method. The autopsy results showed that Michael died from excessive blood loss, and if he had received timely medical assistance, his life could have been saved. In addition, he suffered a laceration to his left eye, and toxicology tests also showed a high alcohol concentration in his body. A few days before the incident, Michael and his wife Danielle had a heated argument at home, which was witnessed by their eldest daughter Jaden. During the argument, Michael, who had been drinking, barged into the bathroom where Danielle was hiding. Jaden intervened and took the bottle of wine from her father. Danielle then left the house and only returned after Michael had fallen asleep. Although this was the first time Jaden had seen his father so angry, he later apologized for his behavior many times. Despite the incident, Jaden described his father as a loving and caring person. However, she believes that her mother often instigated conflicts that led to such arguments. The next day, Michael and his wife tried to make up, and he invited her and the children to watch a football game. Although they spent time together, Danielle seemed sad and uncommunicative. After taking the children to a friend's house for a sleepover, the couple returned home alone. That evening, Danielle went to McDonald's and returned home around 10:30 p.m. When she entered the house, she found Michael drunk. While they were having dinner, Danielle received a sudden text message from a strange man. When Michael saw this, he became aggressive, bit into a hamburger and spat at her. He then attacked Danielle, trying to strangle her. In self-defense, Danielle quickly grabbed a nearby knife and stabbed Michael in the chest. He fell to the ground and began to bleed profusely. Danielle claimed that after the incident, she called the emergency services but got the wrong number. This was later confirmed during the investigation. She said that she was so shocked that she lay down next to Michael and slept until morning. Danielle admitted that she lied during the emergency call and subsequent questioning, citing fear as her motive. Specifically, she feared that her claim of self-defense would not be believed. Her concerns were not unfounded, given her recent history. Shortly before the incident, she had been involved in a fight with friends. When police arrived at the scene, she resisted, attempting to bite one of them. She also refused to cooperate with the investigation, resulting in charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Danielle was placed on probation for approximately 1 year. An investigation revealed that the cuts on Danielle's wrists were self-inflicted due to emotional turmoil, but the injuries were superficial and not life-threatening. Therefore, her words were not to be believed. Upon further investigation, the police discovered that after learning about Michael's affair, she registered on a dating website where she socialized with men retaliated by being unfaithful. Her profile status stated that she was single and not in a relationship. Analysis of numerous messages between Michael and Danielle showed that she still loved her husband. When she learned about his affair, she felt betrayed. Danielle discovered that her husband, Michael, had intended to leave her, despite his constant expressions of remorse and desire to mend their relationship. This fact made it difficult for her to understand and accept his actions. Danielle shared that she felt heartbroken, believing that she had wasted the best years of her life on someone who did not value her. The prosecution used this information to argue that the crime was premeditated, motivated by a desire for revenge for her husband's infidelity and impending divorce. According to Danielle's neighbors, she was prone to fits of rage, and their arguments often escalated into physical fights. Michael and Danielle were viewed differently by those who knew them. Michael was described as kind and helpful, while Danielle was seen as argumentative. Evidence presented in the case showed that Danielle, acting irrationally and attacking her husband. Danielle's attorney argued that her actions were in self-defense and that she had a history of emotional and physical abuse. Relatives who often witnessed their arguments confirmed that Michael was rude and that he often mistreated and humiliated her, although he never did so in front of them. Several family members reported that Danielle was anxious and had a bad temper, which only emerged after many years of marriage. The prosecution focused on the fact that Danielle left her husband to die, possibly out of hatred and resentment towards Michael. In addition, the prosecution emphasized that Danielle would lose a significant portion of their accumulated wealth if they divorced. Furthermore, the prosecution pointed to inconsistencies in Danielle's testimony, suggesting that she was attempting to confuse the investigation and possibly tamper with evidence. Danielle was offered a plea deal during the investigation to admit to manslaughter, which would have resulted in only 10 years in prison. Despite the offer, she declined, choosing instead to maintain her innocence, although she faced life in prison if convicted of first or second-degree murder. Trial takes place on July 17, 2022. The jury returned a verdict, finding Danielle Redlich not guilty of premeditated murder, as they believed her actions were in self-defense. However, they found her guilty of tampering with evidence, which resulted in her receiving a 5-year suspended sentence. On August 5, 2022, the day the verdict was announced, Danielle Redlich was released from court.